Well, hey everyone, welcome back to another segment of Outpost Review. I guess you can see that I've got now this section basically that is the living room. This corner is the bedroom, of course. I had done the kitchen the other day, but I have got this far. I found it easier to build these frames before I put them up. Now, I would take and put one up and then put the other side up and then go around. But what I started doing is I laid them down, I tapped 2 holes, put screws in the corner, and just slide them over that and just anchor them in there. And that seems to be a whole lot easier way of doing that. But, you know, the other thing that I'm going to have to do too is around this door, I'm going to use a 2x6 frame because I've got some massive hinges that my neighbor's going to make for this big 3.5-inch thick door that I'm going to make. So I need some meat to be able to screw them to. So I've got to stop by the lumber yard and pick up some 2x6s, a couple of them to encase that door. You know, too, we've been talking about a front porch later. Although these battens run all the way down, until I actually get that done, you know, I needed to cover the crack. But what I'll do is I'll take my skill saw and I'll set it, and I'll just come back through here and cut the bottom of the battens off, because the porch will actually come in. I don't know, I may decide to just make one step up, that way I don't actually have to cut those. But you know, we'll wait and see. But if I do cut them, it's not going to be hard. I just trim the bottom of them off and put my 1x10 up here, and then just go ahead and build my porch or my deck and be done with it. But yeah, it's looking really good. I'm very proud of this siding, the burnt look, and I'm very proud of that Australian timber frame oil. It seems to be doing a really good job. So I was using some clear caulk. It says it's clear, but around the corner it was drying white, and I don't like that. So what I'm going to do is dig it back out. But I got a few places in the wood right here where I'm going to use some black caulking and fill that up, because it'll just kind of blend in there. But it's really turning out nice. I like it. And here's the other thing too, is, you know, these basically burned light. So by putting that frame on here, it's going to be dark, and then using dark battens wherever there may have been a lighter board, it's pulling it all together and making it primarily, you know, one, I don't really think one color, but it's pulling it all together. Let me just leave it at that. It's actually pulling everything together. So it's turning out nice regardless of whether some are light and some are dark. And I really, really do like that siding. I had a lot of comments too that people, you know, hey, they're beginning to really like that. They never liked it before, but the more they look at it, the more they like it. So I have seen it done before. I've never burned it. I've used stain and stained them really dark like that. But I like that burnt effect. And, you know, I think that the burning is going to just serve to help it last longer. So, yeah, really, really nice. And it'll look really good when I get the rock on the bottom too. So had a lot of questions about the layout of the property. So what I thought I would do is I just kind of take the camera around and kind of show you a little bit, you know, of kind of where the boundaries are on the Outpost property up here. So right up here is the cabin, and this is just a little road that I had made to come down here into this hollow. It actually helped because used to, years and years ago, we would go down this way, but it has got all grown up since I hadn't been living out here for about 20 years, and I would have had to have cleared a path. So I had this small road cut right down the bank here, and that helped me to haul all the logs up. But the property actually goes up this hill right here. It goes across the top a pretty good ways. I'll show you here later on when we get up to the top. but it follows, it kind of goes down at an angle, but then it follows this ridge about halfway, and it goes all the way where you can see up in the saddle, right up in there. Okay, it follows that ridge up there, and then it comes back down this ridge, and then it goes up that ridge right there, and you can see the sun setting back over the ridge right there. This is that big tall ridge that I talk about, where the sun actually, when it hits that ridge and goes down the other side, then once I get out to the bottom of the driveway, I actually have about another hour and 15 minutes of daylight. But I'm going to pan right around the corner here to where you can see now the ridge is coming down, and way out across through there is where I was talking about we used to have a road, and the road is probably, I'd say, maybe 400 or 500 yards from here. So that would be the boundary line. When I'll show you that later. A few videos ago I came down here when we had a big snowstorm, and that's actually a hemlock tree that actually hit my temporary base camp. So I'm going to have to come down here at some point and fix that. But this hollow right here is where the former house that I built, that was a 2-story, 3,500 square foot home, and this home right here, which is around 1,000, but there's a lot more lumber in this one because I built a timber frame, which if I'd have cut that lumber up, it would have went a whole lot farther. But this hollow right here, in the last 25 years, has built 2 homes. So all of the logging that I've done, I just felled trees on both sides. Now there are huge trees, probably I'd say 75 yards to 100 yards, starting up and going up to the peak of that ridge, all the way to the very saddle back there, and then also coming all the way back down here, which I could harvest those because I've got a cable long enough. I've got a 250-foot cable. And I've done it before where there was a tree that I wanted. What I would do is I would just fell the tree up there, knock all the limbs off, pull that cable up the ridge, tie onto it, use a block and tackle down here to another tree, hook the tractor up, and actually pull the tractor this way, and then I would actually snake the log off that ridge down to the bottom, and then I, of course, unhook, and then I could go back up there, grab a hold of it, and take it down. So, but this does have a little creek in here. It doesn't run. There used to be, years ago, there was a spring up there, and it pretty much flowed lightly all the time. But I think it's kind of dried up. But yeah, it does have a really small creek right here, but it primarily only runs when it rains. But this is it's also a very dark section of the woods because this ridge is fairly high. And when the sun comes across, especially in the wintertime, when it's really low, there's not a whole lot of sunlight. Only in the summertime, when it's directly up high, we'll probably get a couple hours more of sunlight. But anyway, this is the property, and I thought I would bring you down here and start on this end to show you. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to pick up and we're going to walk down the driveway, and I'll show you where the road is, and then I'll show you the layout of the field down there. That it's all grown up. I need to reclaim it because I hadn't lived here in many years before I started this project. But it used to be a fairly nice field that I do need to cut the trees and you know, like I say, reclaim it. But anyway, let me fold the camera up and we'll go down there and we'll talk about that portion. All right, now right through here and around the corner to the left and go up the hollow, that's where we were, probably I'd say about 200 yards. So I've actually come down the driveway back this way, but you can see all these footprints. This is where the game comes in and out. They actually come up right there, and you can see all these So this is a game trail. But before we walk actually all the way down to the bottom, you can see through there. That's the field down there that actually grew up. It has a lot of trees in it that I'm going to have to reclaim. It used to be a really nice field. And of course, right down there you can see a big bend in the creek. It used to kind of run straight through there, and it started eroding quite a bit of the property, so I'm going to have to at some point go down and I'm going to have to cut this section out right here so it will redirect itself, because otherwise it'll just keep moving back that way, taking property with it. Okay, right here is my neighbor's driveway. I actually gave him that right of way years ago. That was part of this property. And then of course I used to own on this side of the road, but I sold it when I got divorced. But this is an old logging road that goes over to a barn. That logging road used to go right up through here. So when I first started this project, I actually brought my tractor and drove down this bank right here. I cut it down somewhat with my blade, and it was probably, the driveway was doubled from what used to be the old logging road, but I could actually take my tractor and go right up through the woods when I was actually clearing brush and clearing a right of way to make this driveway. But yeah, this is where the old logging road used to go, and it went right across where that game trail, because right there is where we were a while ago. It went right on across to that other hollow, so you had access to all of these hollows years ago, because when we first moved here, my grandparents actually had select cut this property, and they paid for nearly all of it. I think that they had paid for like 80% of it, and so they only had to come up with 20%. And you can see it doesn't look like we're missing any trees. They're everywhere. Because I tell you, you know, you cut the big ones out where the sun can get down and hit the ground, and those smaller trees, they'll shoot right up. But yeah, there was a lot of hardwoods that was harvested off the tops of these ridges and so forth, because this all used to be grassland. But it was harvested off those ridges, and they brought it out through those hollows and across this logging road. But anyway, I'll show you down here. You can actually see way out there, that's the road, and here's the driveway that actually comes across where the creek is, right down here, and comes up and then turns. This property over here now, the driveway actually divides. I used to own this before I got divorced and sold it, but it probably ran, I don't know, a quarter to a half a mile in that direction. But this now all belongs to another one of my good neighbors that actually bought the house that I had built prior. And then of course everything on this side of the line is still mine. So right now it's running pretty good. It's probably, I'd say, 2.5 foot deep, especially on this side, and then of course it gets a little bit shallower over there because it's much wider. But generally in the summertime it probably runs, I'd say, 4 to 6 inches deep constantly. There's not a lot of flow, but I tell you what, I've also seen this during the rainy season, to where this creek, and there's so many twists and turns in it that it can't handle the water, and there would be water 150 to 200 feet wide coming through and actually coming up over the top of this culvert. Especially when we get those hard rains and it just runs down off of the mountains, and it just, a lot of times it takes everything in its path. But I still think that there's enough water in there that we could possibly work on some hydro projects later on. But yep, that's the creek that comes down through here that basically serves this property. So I'm going to take you down here a little bit and see if I can't show you the field now. That cedar tree that's right out there in the center, way out at the farthest point, my property runs a little bit past that. But you can see this field right here. It's a good sized field. There's probably, I'd say, somewhere around 5 acres, maybe 6 acres right in here that runs right over to the creek. We were actually standing right up on that section earlier when I was showing you down around the creek. But it's a good size piece of property that I do need to at some point work on it to try to reclaim it, because it just got grown over with nobody tending it for several years. Thought I'd shoot a little video before I got to the top. That cabin is actually looking good against the backdrop of the woods and the compost toilet. Whenever I get some of that tung oil on that compost toilet, that will change it a little bit, but I think it'll all blend in. It's really going to look nice. So yeah, I'm really proud of that woodwork, the way that it's turning out. So just thought I would take a little shot of that on my way up. And this dead pine tree that's right here, it's right on the line. So I'm actually standing where I've shown you before that I'm actually going to build the chicken house, which is going to be right in here. So I'm still 50-75 feet away from the line. It's so steep, nobody couldn't do anything with it anyway. Even if something happened to my neighbor and the property got sold, they wouldn't be able to do anything with that right there. So I felt comfortable about moving this close to the property line to put the chicken house in there. Now, if I turn right around here, okay, so right here is that dead pine. If we follow at an angle right on up into right about in here, which is basically the crown of the ridge, then the property line turns and it goes right straight up that ridge back to where that saddle was down around the base camp where I was showing you, to the left and to the right. Okay, I walked on up the peak of the ridge, and right in here is where it starts climbing at a pretty good ascent. So that's a pretty steep angle right there. I came from back in there. So the property line is kind of running up this ridge line right here. Okay, right off behind me right here is where the base camp is at, or my temporary base camp. And then, of course, like I was saying, this ridge, the line follows this ridge, goes right on up, then it turns once it gets to the peak up there, and it follows that saddle down, goes back up, follows that big huge ridge behind me, and then goes back down to the road. The only thing that I haven't shown you is the very far corner. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up all my tools and get ready to leave, because it won't be long and the sun will be over the ridge. But anyway, guys, I hope that this kind of helps, as far as the layout up here at the Outpost. I've had a lot of questions on it, over the last couple of years, and so I figured what I would do is just go ahead and kind of halfway show you, since the leaves are gone, where you can see a little bit better. But just think, until it starts getting real steep right there, all of this used to be pasture. It all used to be grassland. They had cows on it in 1970 when we moved here. So within the last 50 years, all of this has grown up, and it was enough to where I could harvest to build 2 fairly substantial houses out of it. Also, I built the compost toilet, I built the sawmill shed, I built the outdoor kitchen, and there's just so much timber here now, especially since the snow came. It's knocked down so much, it's going to take me a while, to just go in there and clean it up. But anyway, yep, this is the layout, like I say, of the Outpost. I hope that this helps some. We do appreciate you guys, all your support and everything. I know this video is a little bit different, but I felt that I would go ahead and answer that question. I knew it was going to take a little bit of time to run around and do it. But anyway, like I said, you know, my son, my daughter, and I, we appreciate all your support, guys. Thanks for stopping by and tuning in. Hope everyone has a great afternoon. Take care. We look forward to seeing you back up here at the Outpost again next time.